guys, Joel Rather here with Hunt Hike Harvest Outdoors, and today we're going to bring you our call series. This is something that I think a lot of us over the course of our careers as hunters have all gone through. We have all tried different combinations, different types, different tubes, different diaphragms, different mouth calls, and so what we want to do is we want to try and bring this to you in really kind of an unbiased perspective, where we want to show you how some of these are made. We're going to show you the differences in how some of the diaphragms themselves are constructed. We're going to talk a little bit about some hand calls, why a tube may be different than another, how they can make some sounds for you, and most importantly, try and find a fit for you that is going to be effective. So this should be a lot of fun. We're going to make a whole lot of noise. We're going to show you how a lot of these sound, and most importantly, try and narrow down your process so that hopefully this will be something that's helpful to you as you start trying to figure out what's the best call for me, what are some things that I can think about as I go out and purchase calls and be able to become an effective caller. Okay guys, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our diaphragm calls. We're going to show you a little bit of how these things are constructed, give you an idea of where the variances lie with some of these to help you understand better where your process may start and how some of these calls vary. So the first thing that you'll notice is we have a whole bunch of different ones here. I have 3 different companies. I've got a few calls from Rocky Mountain, I've got some calls from Phelps, and I have some calls from Primos. And all of them are very similar in some ways and very different in a lot of other ways. The first one is that you'll notice the construction of the material itself is pretty standard. They're all going to be this kind of flexible material, and they're actually made so that you can trim these. One of the biggest mistakes that guys make, especially starting out, is they assume that this is what the call should look like, and they throw it in their mouth and it doesn't fit, or the shape of the roof of their mouth doesn't really vibe very well with these. And so you'll notice, if you take a look at this one, for example, I've cut this one and made it so that it's a little bit smaller so that it fits the roof of my mouth a little bit better and sits up in there so that I can blow that more effectively. A lot of guys will say, oh man, I'm gagging on it, it just, it feels like I can't get it to sit right. Start with that. You've got to trim these down if they don't fit your mouth right. It should sit up in there, and it really, for all intents and purposes, shouldn't really bother you to have it sit in the roof of your mouth. I carry mine, a lot of times I have it in my mouth for long periods of time. I want it to be comfortable. So that's the first thing. The second thing is construction of the dome itself. We've got 3 different styles of domes here. You'll notice with the Phelps calls, they have a metal plate in the top. There's a small little divot that's in each one of them, which allows you to put air over the top of that. It's going to give you different variances in pressure that will allow you to put air over the top of that reed. If you look at the Primos call here has a metal plate, but it's covered on the top here, and they've split it on both sides. This is their Imperial call. This is the Primos Imperial call. So similar, but slightly different. And then the third variation here, which is the Rocky call, they used a plastic plate on the top, and the plastic plate has, again, a little bit of a divot, but their divot is a little deeper and almost has a little bit of an incision that goes down in the roof of this plate that, again, is going to allow you to make slightly different sounds. But the thing that is going to make the biggest difference is the latex itself. So if you look at some of these calls, you notice this is white, this is green, this is a different color green, I've got some clear here. They're going to all be based on different types of latex, different thicknesses, and most importantly, if you watch our podcast we did with Jason Phelps and Dirk Durham, as well as a little bit of the discussions that we had with Steve Chappell from Elk Camp TV, they are going to give you different sounds based on the type, the thickness, and the tension. You can take these and they put them into a machine where they're going to stretch these. They're going to stretch them down to the 10,000th of a pound in order to change how that diaphragm or how that latex is going to sound based on the tension that they put it in. And so realistically, that is the biggest difference in all of these, is that is where the sound variation is going to come from. Different thickness, different tension, different types is going to give you different sounds. So we want to dig into this, give you a little insight on how we're going to start kind of going through the tubes next, and then start making some sounds with these and see how they vary based on the type and style of call that we're using. All right, guys, so we're going to move on from the diaphragm to start talking about the tubes. With the tubes, if you've ever walked into any of your local sporting goods stores, Bass Pro Shops, or wherever you shop, you'll notice that there's an entire wall of calls that you can choose from. There's expandables, there's flexible, there's fixed, there's larger ones, there's smaller ones. So we want to try and start making sense of how all of them differ and how we're going to narrow down what might be a good fit for you or something that fits your style or type of calling in itself. So on the far left here, I've got a Rocky Mountain call here. This is their Wapiti Whacker. I've got the Phelps Unleashed tube. I've got their Phelps smaller, what I call their mini-me. I'm not 100% sure what the name of that one is, but that's what I call it. I've got a P&B tube here that's a little bit flexible. You'll notice a lot of difference in shape and size of that one. And then I've got our novelty over here. This is something I picked up years ago that I just saw in the bargain cave or whatever. It was like 10 bucks. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. We're going to see if we can make some noise out of this one. This one probably is going to be our fun for the day. So we're not going to focus too much on that. But just to give you an idea that there are just so many different types and styles of tubes when you get out there. How in the world do we determine the differences between all of them? So some small things. First and foremost is features within the Wapiti Whacker. Number one, they make this with a removable mouthpiece, which is really nice. And it allows you to have two different sizes of mouthpiece on here. You'll hear that kind of click on there. I really like that feature because a lot of guys will find that different, feel on the mouth and things like that are going to have different preferences for guys. And so this allows you to have a little bit of adjustability that you don't see in a lot of other calls. The other nice thing that they did is they added a rubber kind of padding that goes around the end of this tube that allows you to, if you bang it or hit it on trees or things like that, it's not going to make a lot of noise. Why is that important? Well, if I move over to this one and this one clicks or hits on wood, you'll hear a really synthetic and kind of odd sound, which is something that we're not afraid to make noise in the woods, but we don't want it to be something that's alerting, alarming, or off that could potentially spook animals. So this is a nice feature with this that I really like. When I move on to the Phelps Call, you notice it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger in diameter. It's a one piece with a handle here. The end piece is a little bit bigger as far as the receiver goes, and very similar in nature, but different in size and structure. The smaller one is virtually the same as this in just a smaller version. And again, one piece, very similar. And then we've got this one, which is a little bit more flexible, similar in size as far as the mouthpiece here, but you'll notice a different shape in the end of this tube. And then this one, which is supposed to look like a horn, I guess. So, but the reeds in this one are actually enclosed into the end. These are adjustable. There's like 2 or 3 different kinds that go with this guy. And our mission for the day is to see if we can make an elk sound with that one, which could be a challenge. So, moving on. Some small things. Baffles. Baffles are a huge part of tubes to me. If you'll notice at the end of this one here, I've got about a 1/2 to 3/4 inch baffle on the inside of the Phelps tube. On this one, the Rocky Mountain, it's a little bit more curved and smaller here, and you'll notice the diameter in itself is a little bit smaller as well. The Phelps Mini-Me has a little bit of a baffle, but again, it's about half the size of the normal one. And then this one here is a little bit similar to the size of what the Mini-Me is. And the reason that that's important is if I'm blowing pressure or air through that tube, those baffles serve as kind of a backstop, and it's going to buffer sound that then creates a little bit more fullness that allows you to get a deeper tone in a lot of cases, especially as you chuckle and make some of those other noises. And so those are things that I look at when I start to blow these, that is going to change tone, it's going to change noise, it's going to change the sounds that we put through these, and ultimately give me variations in how all of these work. Now, me as the user, I'm probably going to be the biggest factor in all of this, which is how we're going to get into this. And the goal here is I'm not going to try and make one of these sound or look better than the other. I'm going to try and give similar sounds. And then we're going to try and break these down. We're going to show you some difference in variance of the actual tone through some instrumentation that we have through an app, and give you how these are going to vary from call to call. All right, guys, so what we are going to do is start to put the diaphragms with the tubes and see what kind of sounds that we can make with these. Now, in order to do this the most consistently, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a few of them and I'm going to run through them so you can see if there's differences, if you can hear tone and sound that's different from one to the next without mixing and matching so that there's confusion. I'm going to choose one and I'm going to run through the tubes here and see if we can tell a difference between tube to tube and from diaphragm to diaphragm. So here we go. The first one that I am going to pick up is one that I blow a lot, that I'm probably maybe the most comfortable with, and that is the Phelps Maverick. Sorry, Jason. I do use Jason's call as well, but I like this one. And again, as we talked about, in terms of finding ones that fit for you based on tension and sound and ease of blowing, I blow this one quite a bit, but I do switch them up. So to start with, I'm going to blow this Maverick call through the Phelps call first. So we're going Phelps to Phelps here, but again, nothing says I can't blow them with any tube that I want. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm utilizing them a little bit, again, in an unbiased manner so that we can hear the difference in variation from tube to tube and from call to call. So here we go. So just a real basic, simple bugle. Objective is to just kind of climb. I'm not claiming to be an expert caller, but my goal is to try and make these the same kind of pitch and kind of escalation here. So that's the Phelps call with the Maverick. We're going to use the same call, and we're going to move on to the Rocky Mountain here and see if we can hear a difference in how this one sounds. So here we go. Okay, so if you were listening, you can tell a small difference between the two of those. The Phelps is probably a little bit higher, a little bit more tone as far as the actual sound. The Rocky Mountain was probably a little bit maybe more full, didn't sound maybe quite as hollow, which again is probably based on the tube itself. All right. Now, if we move on, we're going to go to this mini guy, and this is really going to show us the difference between how a larger tube and a smaller tube would sound, again, using the same call. Here we go. So you can see, just even in that alone, I struggled a little bit with that based on the fact that the tube required different pressure. So I tried to blow that just as evenly, and I struggled a little bit with that just based on the fact of moving from here over to here. Now, that's not to say that this won't make good sound, but I haven't used and I don't practice with this one as much. But you can see right away with the same call that was a little bit more difficult for me, and you can tell that the tone there was also just a little bit different. Can you still make that sound? Can you still make that locator call? Of course you can. Moving on to PB. We're going to use this one as well and see how this one sounds. Now you'll notice flexibility here, so I'm going to kind of give this a little bit of an upturn as I call. So, not too bad there. A little more distance or a little more length in that one gives it a pretty decent tone. And again, the one thing that maybe guys like about that is being able to kind of give that similar pitch and kind of escalation in tone there. And that may be something that you like. I don't like to have two hands and move it around a little bit because I can't really call with this thing flopping around. And so I like to be able to have, you know, a single hand on here, let it rip, and I don't need to have, you know, two hands involved in order to do that. But as you start, we're moving through this process, you can hear the sound differences, as small as they may be, that are going to create some variance, and we just use the same diaphragm all the way down the line. Again, this one has its own, so we can't necessarily blow through that one without using its own tube, which we're going to save that one for the end. It's going to be special, let me tell you. Now, moving on, we are going to go to the Primos. This is their Imperial call. Again, this is a double reed call as opposed to a single reed call. The dome is a little bit different. This is a little bit bigger. I haven't trimmed this, so we're going to see how this goes moving from one to the other. And what you're going to notice is right away, based on comfort, is this may be a little bit more difficult for me, but we're going to try and make the same type of call utilizing all of these. So I'm going to start on the end down here, Primos call with the Rocky Mountain, and we're going to work our way down, and we'll see how this sounds. Here we go. Okay, so not too bad. Maybe a little bit more challenging. I was maybe cautious there, but I still tried to blow the same amount. And to me, I'm not sure. We'll have to look at the amplitude there. Maybe not quite as much, noise or as much pitch in that, but still a nice, easy kind of gradual increase in, from start to finish there. Let's move on to the Phelps. We'll see how this one sounds. Good. So might have been a little bit better, maybe a little bit more volume with that one, maybe a little bit better job on my part there. But again, I feel like so far in blowing this Primos call, I'm having to blow actually a lot harder to get that same amount of noise to come from the tube itself than I am with the Maverick call so far. So to me, again, if you're going to do a lot of bugling, this can be challenging. If I'm going to bugle a lot throughout the course of a day, 10, 15, 20 times or whatever as I'm covering ground, I don't want to be straining like crazy to blow these things. So that's my first kind of observation and what I feel as I'm blowing it so far. So let's try this one here. All right, so that was actually probably a little bit better because I was able to get a little more consistent tone out of there. Maybe the increase in effort to blow through there actually made that sound a little bit better. And then our last one here. Okay, so not too bad. Again, two-handed versus one-handed. That was the Primos Imperial. And again, if you practice with that, the difference in feel in how this is, it doesn't fit quite as kind of snug across the top of my mouth. I feel like that it kind of moved around a little bit. If I trim that, it might make a little bit of a difference, but overall, still made sound, still capable of, creating a bugle with that. And again, I'm not by any means saying like, oh, nope, I'm never going to use that, I'm going to throw that out, but I'm just trying to give you some idea of how these things are going to change or how they're going to vary. So, moving on. Contender, this is Elk 101, Corey Jacobson's call. Again, plastic dome. This is single reed, and this is the first time I've blown this, so I'm going to see how this one goes and see how it feels in comparison to what I've done in the past. I literally just picked up a couple of these today, and I want to give all of them their fair share and see how they vary in difference. So here we go. Rocky Mountain call with Rocky Mountain diaphragm. Okay, so interesting there. This feels really raspy as I blow through it, and interesting feel comparatively. Fit on this with this dome is a little bit better than that Primos. A little bit more similar to what the Phelps is like, plastic as opposed to metal. I don't know if there's a ton of difference between the plastic and the metal, but this is a little bit different shaped, but still a lot more comfortable, and the size of this is maybe a little bit more favorable to me. So now, this is going to seem maybe a little bit sacrilegious because I'm going to take a Rocky Mountain with the Phelps, and I've already done that in the opposite direction. So, but again, we are trying to do this from an unbiased perspective. So there's nothing that says you can't mix and match these. I know guys have a lot of fun kind of talking trash about the differences, and I like this one and that one. We just want you to become a better caller and a more informed caller. So here we go. You'll notice as I kind of get to the top with that one, There's a little bit of, kind of growliness at the end of that, which I think if I practice with this a little bit, might be a really nice feature and something that I could, grow to really like, and might be something that I would carry in my pack. But maybe with the difference between what I've blown so far, it's the first one out of the three, whereas I get kind of out to that top end where it really kind of wants to, start kind of getting scratchier. And a lot of guys talk about, really gnarly and growly bulls. We'll see how this works as we go through and start doing some chuckling and things like that. So we'll go on to the smaller one here. Okay. Probably didn't like that quite as much. Again, I'm probably struggling the most with this one just based on the tube being a different size and different diameter and different length. Probably would take a lot more practice with that one than what I'm used to using so far. So, and the last one, here we go. Okay, now, based on how this guy kind of crunches that down, you heard that break up a lot earlier. I'm trying to do this as similar as I possibly can. But with that one, I think that the smallness of that tube, having to carry through that length, made that one a little bit more challenging to blow. And you notice in the sound there, I struggled a little bit with that. Not to say that I couldn't probably clean that up, but it gives you an idea of if I'm doing the same thing, where change and variance of practice with what you use is going to give you a lot different sounds based on what you're utilizing. So that kind of gives you an idea. We went through a Primos, we went through a Phelps, we went through a Rocky Mountain. I do have another Rocky Mountain here. This is a very similar call. You notice I've trimmed this one a little bit. And this one's probably a little bit old, to be honest with you. I don't know that I would blow this one again. And maybe going from what I've done so far, this one, I'm struggling with a little bit, and this latex can get old, which at times will start affecting the sound of that. So if I move on to a different Phelps call here, this one is Charlie's, and the purple one, not a bad call, a little bit different. You'll notice a difference in sound here. We'll give this one a whirl. Okay, so kind of a nice, just gradual pitch with a drop off at the end there. We'll blow this through the Phelps tube. Okay, and again, a little bit of variance in there, probably in my consistency. Heard a little bit of a flutter in there. That was more me than it probably was the call. And again, as I'm continuing to blow more of them, the difference in pressure, the difference in tension, the difference in makes my job that much more difficult. So this is again why I tell guys you need to find one that is going to work for you based on your style, your likeness to how it feels, how consistently you can blow that, and work on that. Now, with any and all of these calls, the other thing that we can do is create cow sounds too. So going back to the Maverick here. We can make some nice cow sounds with that. If I go back to the 101. Okay. I think that needs to break in just a touch. I'm getting a little bit where it's not connecting quite in the back. I would maybe trim that a little bit. You can hear a little bit of that hiss in there. If you get to where there's a little bit of that hiss in there, like for example, if I use this one, I'm probably going to get a lot of that based on the size of this. So if you can hear that through the tone, where you can hear that where I'm blowing and I'm not getting any sound, a lot of times what will happen with that is I'm not getting good contact all the way around. I need that thing to be pushed up and laying flat across the back so that when I'm blowing through there, I'm only touching and only getting air over the reed itself. And if I've got where this isn't touching, I get air that comes up over the top instead of through the bottom, and you're going to get more of that hissing noise. So I'm going to do that again with this one and see if you can hear that, because I had a little bit of difficulty here. Okay, if you can hear that, it gives you an idea. Now, that doesn't mean that this call is bad. It doesn't mean that, I should move on. It means that I probably need to look at trimming this so that it fits a little bit better. Maybe this just needs to break in a touch, and that's probably the reason why, some of the ones that I've used prior, maybe a little bit more, that fit a little bit better, you're not going to have as much hiss there. So let's hear this. Okay, so notice there, you didn't hear that air come through there first, all right, which made it a little bit cleaner, and I got a little bit better tone and a little bit better sound from there. So, give you an idea of the differences between all of these. If you're paying attention and really listening, you're going to get different tone and different sound. I can adjust that by blowing harder, blowing softer, right? Like working on that gradual increase as I bugle. Those are things that become more nuanced than they are call, and that's a big part of it as well. So the first thing, if you listen to a lot of guys, what they're going to tell you is blow through a call and try to make a consistent sound. I've seen guys talk about like, hey, all I want you to do, I'm not trying to make a call, all I want you to do is make a sound. Okay, and see if you can make that thing just level, right? Like just make a level sound. We're not trying to make an up and down. We're not trying to like crescendo that thing all the way to the top. Try and make a sound and try and see if you can find the right amount of pressure to just make that nice and even. And as you do that, then you can work on going up in tone and going down in tone. So for example, okay, and that doesn't sound anything like a call, but what I'm doing is learning how much pressure do I have to put in there, how much air do I have to drive over that thing to go from here to here, and ultimately to start from here and gradually progress my way all the way up. So that's something from a calling perspective that is a good drill for people to do, because a lot of guys will go, well, hey, I just want to bugle, I'm going to throw my diaphragm, grab my tube, and I'm going to start wailing away, right? And what you need to start with is, can I make consistent sound? And then start working on growing into more complex sounds and variations in tones and things like that. And that is where a lot of this stuff really starts to change the way and sound and tone and ability of the caller themselves. So, all right, guys, so the last piece of this puzzle is we're going to go through a couple of hand calls. And a lot of guys like to carry some hand calls with them. I have a few of them here with me. I actually forgot I did have another Primos hand call. And what you're going to see is a lot of them that look like this. This is the Phelps Easy Estrus. And they have a little bit of a ring on here. There's a small reed that goes across the top of them. This is made out of a wood. This is their Mini X, which is basically kind of how this is. It's a smaller version of the same call. Very similar design, just in a smaller version. And everyone's favorite, we have the Hoochie Mama and the Mini Hoochie. And everybody that's ever stepped foot in the woods has probably heard someone blow these. But we're going to show you a little bit of variations between them. But a lot of them follow similar types and styles of these. And we're just going to show you how, from a call perspective, especially cow calling, these are going to vary. And so we're going to start with these because it's kind of fun. This is a great design. There's really nothing wrong with these. The only thing that I struggle with in terms of hand calls is if I'm going to cow call, I have to find this and pull it out. It's got to be on my pack, it's got to be in my pocket, it's got to be readily usable. And so I'm kind of on the fence at times when I do use them. If we have elk coming in close or we're getting to where we need to be prepared, I usually just stick to the diaphragm, and that's just personal preference, but a lot of guys prefer them. The cool thing about the design with these is that they actually make these to extend and kind of compress, and what that does is these are super simple. All I have to do is just depress this plunger here, right? If I move this down, you'll notice a difference in sound. Right? And so it does give me some variance. The smaller one is the same way. If I move this out, if I move it in, you notice that's a lot shorter and a lot quicker, right? But are they simple? Yes. Can anybody use them? Yes. Is that a benefit? 100%. If you're not a confident caller, this is something that could be very simple for you, right? The one downfall with this is it doesn't give you a lot of difference in tone. So when you heard me cow calling with this, it makes it really difficult to change a whole lot of tone. This is kind of going to be, you know, what you see is what you get. We can change that a little bit in tone, but it's not going to give us a ton of variance to lengthen it out, create some of those kind of crazy noises a lot of times that we'll hear a cow make that are a little bit more bawly and kind of drawn out. But it doesn't mean that that's bad. If you're just trying to create a little bit of presence, those are a reasonable and very affordable option. As I move on to the Easy Estrus, these are a variation and a really nice change in being able to move from a diaphragm to something that is going to be a little bit more specific, especially to estrus-based calling, that I really love. So if we blow through this, you'll hear the difference in how this sounds compared to the other ones that we've used so far, like this. So really nice tone, and you'll notice the difference in richness in that compared to everything else that we've done so far. This gives you a lot of nice kind of variation and sounds a lot more, to me, sounds a lot more lifelike and a lot more real. And it's got a little bit of that, like you can hear the difference in that estrus based on that compared to, say, the diaphragm, and definitely not the other hand call. So really nice. All I'm doing is I'm starting kind of with my mouth kind of here, and I just gradually move that up as I blow, and I can kind of change how much and how quickly or how slowly I move up and down that, and that's where I get that change in tone. Right? So very nice, very good call. If I move on to the Mini, I like it because it's compact. Let's notice the difference in tone and sound compared to the Easy Estrus, and we'll see how this one sounds. So, very similar, maybe just a little bit, again, fluctuation in sound and call. Some guys may prefer, hey, I'm going to carry both of these. I typically will go with one or the other. This one is maybe just a little bit more finicky to blow just based on size, whereas I feel like I have a little bit more confidence in blowing the Easy Estrus, which is probably my go-to. So you notice that I don't have a lanyard on this because what I like to do is just throw this in my pocket and have it ready, or I can stuff it into the side of my bino harness, and I can always be able to switch super easy. Pull the diaphragm out, boom, go right to this, and something that I really like. A lot of the other, you know, Rocky makes calls that are very similar to this. I know that Primos does as well. And they're all going to, again, have different variations of how the construction is. Some of these are made with a plastic. I really like the wood. I feel like the wood with that gives it just a little more richness that plastic doesn't necessarily give you. But again, it goes down to preference, and it goes down to your ability to blow it and blow that call more consistently. So that's a really, you know, good breakdown of everything we have on the table here. If I were to mix and match all these, I probably have 30, 40 or more different combinations of 8 different diaphragm calls with 4 to 5 different bugle tubes here. And so ultimately, what I hope that you gain from this is simply that you need to find the right call from a diaphragm perspective that you can blow and blow consistently, work on being able to create tone, then work on being able to create variability and consistency, and then continue to work your way out from there. So the last part of this is we're going to get into some of the other variations in calls. So we're talking about lip balls, we're talking about grunts, we're talking about chuckles and some of those things. And we want to hear the differences. I think you'll hear a lot of difference in the tubes themselves as we go through this. And that's going to be where things will really start kind of shaking up in a lot of differences between some of these. So we're going to start in the same fashion as I did with the other one. We're going to go with the Maverick here. We're going to go through these. And I'm just going to try and do a consistent chuckle with this. And we're going to see if we can hear a difference in tone between all of these. Here we go. Okay, so really nice tone. Here's some back pressure in there, right? We want to hear kind of that like woof, woof come off of that. And we get that with that Rocky. Move on to Unleashed tube here. Okay, now understand that a big part of this too is the noise that I'm making, right? I'm not just going, right? I'm actually going, right? So I have control over how much of that is going through that tube. I have to understand that I have a lot to do with how that sounds. So that's something that takes practice, but you'll notice a small difference between those two. I think the baffle and the back pressure in the Phelps tube there, it gives me a little bit more richness and deepness in that one. But again, with the Rocky, do I get similar? Do I get good tone and sound with that? Of course. Okay, let's move on to the smaller one. Let's see how this one does compared to those, because obviously a big difference in how this one works. Okay. You'll notice not as much back pressure there. I'm not getting near the amount of back pressure through that one as I do through the larger tubes, which makes that maybe a little bit less likely for me to want to do a ton of chuckling and things like that. But could I? Of course. All right, let's try the last one here with P&B. Okay, again, very similar. I don't get a ton of back pressure through there. I feel like all of that kind of grunt and chuckle really came more from me than I got back from the tube itself. So if I go back to here, right, you can hear a little bit just more bellow that comes with that, and the same with this. Okay. Now, if I go through all these different calls, they're all going to provide me the same ability to make those sounds, chuckles and what have you. The amount that I put through there, obviously I can become a lot more aggressive with those. If I go through and use the contender. Okay. Very similar. I put a little bit more air through there, as I mentioned, but at the same time, I'm still getting that sound. Okay, so keep in mind, those are small variances between all of them, and you'll notice there's a difference in tone with that one as well. If I practice with that one, I can probably lengthen that one out. But the last part of this is going to be probably the most difficult of all, which is the lip ball. In the lip ball, one of the things that we have to be able to do is, in the lip ball, which is probably one of the most difficult of all of these that we've done so far, one of the things we have to be able to do is kind of flutter or move our lips so that we get some of that, and then we extend that out, or we put that at the end and lip ball towards the top end of that. So I'm going to go to what I'm most comfortable with in terms of this. I'll try it with a few of the others, but we'll kind of see how this sounds as I go through all of them as well. And notice again, difference in tone and difference in sound. Okay, so you're a little bit more kind of raspiness to that. Move on to the Phelps. Again, Get a little bit difference in tone and sound with that one as well. I'm letting those lips kind of freaking move over the top of there. So that one actually was really good. That one maybe I did a better job with, but that kind of lip ball into a bugle was pretty solid with that one. I actually liked that one pretty good. Maybe I did a better job there, but in terms of sound, that one actually produced a pretty good sound. Last one here. Again, very capable and very comparable. But it comes down to, again, what are the things that most fit your style and what you think based on what you hear is going to be the most fitting. So with that being said, this gives you a good idea of how many options there are, how much it comes down to the caller and the practice and the way with which you utilize these tubes. I'm not going to tell you that, hey, this is my sole tube or my sole diaphragm. I do like to mix and match. I usually keep my calls in my truck at all times and utilize them frequently. And I like to try different ones. Obviously, adding some of these to the mix gives me some other things to play around with. But right now, for me, the tubes that I use the most are the Phelps Unleashed tube or the Rocky Mountain Wapiti Whacker. And the reeds that I carry are typically the Maverick, Jason's call here, and usually one of the other Phelps calls, and I'll probably add in and work with the Contender a little bit this year and see if I can learn how to blow that one a little bit better, as obviously Corey and the number of world championships that he's produced probably knows a thing or two about that, and so I'll see if I can maybe hone in on better utilization of that. But at the same time, as you talk to guys about the differences between them, what makes a good caller isn't the call itself, it's finding the right one that fits you. And so just because, again, as I mentioned, Corey's won the 10, 11, 12 world championships doesn't mean that you can pick that up and it's going to fit you perfectly. And just the same as any of the other calls that I've had, Dirk has told me many times, hey, the Maverick is what works for him based on how he's built that call with Jason over the years. It doesn't mean that that call is going to fit you. And so don't try to cram yourself into, I want to blow that call. Try to move towards what call works best for me. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. We hope that this helps in your process. And before we sign off, I am going to blow this guy right here, and we'll see if I can make any sound at all with this guy, and we'll leave you with this as our parting gift for the call series. So here we go. Well, all we can say is we tried. There was a third call or a third read on this that I had that dried out on me that I did practice a couple times that made a little bit better tone than that. But as you can tell, that is a total strikeout for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Hopefully it was helpful to you, informative, and gives you a little bit better idea about the calls themselves. If you like this video, smash that like button. Please subscribe to our page. We really appreciate it. We're going to continue to try and bring you as much and as good of content as we possibly can. Everything from our reviews to our podcasts, to our excursions, to our hunts. And our mission is that you guys will enjoy them and keep coming back for more. So until next time, thanks so much for tuning in, and good luck, and we'll see you out in the woods.